And the beauty with this is that when they are, rested and awake, they can crawl off and come find us. They don't need to, scream, I'm done. I need to get out of here. They just crawl over, or, we've set up the prepared environment. So there might be a toy or a book that they can play with or look at. And the beauty too is that when they are tired, well, they know where to go and they go on their own. They don't need us to read their cues of, oh, are you tired? Are you not? Maybe I should put you down. Maybe not, right? They know where their bed is and they go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Education Involved with Yogi Patel. And today we have a special guest, a colleague, a friend of mine, Jeanne Paynel, and she's an experienced Montessori educator. She has been in the San Diego area working with me side by side with other Montessorians for over 20 years. So, Jeanne-Marie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Yogi. It's been great. And it's funny when I was trying to reminisce on our relationship and Montessori and all that. And you are one of my first big observation, because when you were just starting out and you had a beautiful environment in your home, I came to observe because I was learning, I was training to be a Montessori guide. So it goes way back. So it's wonderful to be here today. Full circle.
Full circle. And we're more connected than not. And I remember that first day for me as well, that observation, what a gift as a teacher that we all give and get, right? So welcoming folks into our environments, to invite the newly trained teachers to come and observe and learn through that observation, because what we learn in our training centers, often when we bring it back, it's a little bit different.
It is, very much so, very much so.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get to Montessori and what have you been doing?
So a little bit about my background. So I am Jeanne Paynel. I am a French-American world citizen, and I have been living here in San Diego for 25 years. I am a wife and mother of two young adults, 27 and 23. And I came to Montessori around my 40s. So I was already a mother. I was already a parent of two. I had an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. And it's one of those transitions in life, I think, when my husband and I were contemplating moving back to Europe, and I was realizing that what I was doing in advertising, because I was a graphic designer in advertising for 20-some years, was really not doing it for me anymore. And when I, really had some deep thoughts about what I really wanted to do and give back to the world, it always came back to children. I had, I think, always been very connected to children from a very young age. I was lucky to become an older sister when I was older. At 11, both my parents decided to have new families, and I was blessed with 4 younger siblings, and just loved that role, loved being able to be that little mother. And when I would have time off from school, I would actually volunteer at my brother's daycare. I mean, that's how much I love children. When I was a teenager, a big volunteer job that I had was in a children's museum. So here I am, 40, mother, wanting to do a transition in career. And I thought, well, I need to look into a Montessori training because Montessori was something that I actually had picked up a book of Dr. Maria Montessori's when I was pregnant of my first child. And I always say that it gave me permission to have my child lead me to be the parent she needed me to be. And so that had a big influence in my parenting. And so I looked into the Montessori training here in San Diego. And I very naively called, thinking that it was a school that there would be, a spring semester, a fall semester, a spring semester. And I was told that, oh no, we just started a week ago and it is a full year program. But if you're interested, you can come and meet the director tomorrow morning at 8. And honestly, Yogi, I hung up the phone and I knew my life was about to take a whirlwind. And it did, because within the next 24 hours, I changed careers. I went to the institute. I met the director. At the time, it was Dr. Dubovoy, who, sat me down and asked me, why are you here? And I said, well, I truly believe that children are way more capable than we give them credit for. And she said, well, you're in the right place. And she invited me to sit in on her lecture, which she was about to give on movement. And it just was one of those, kind of out of body experience, like, oh, this is where I need to be. I went back to work that I had, told them I'd be in a little late that morning, and gave my resignation and went back to school. And I was 43 years old, and I've never looked back. And it's been wonderful. And since then, after having been in the classroom for a few years, I decided that I really wanted to share this knowledge and share this information with parents, because I think that if we had some of this knowledge and some of these tools when we start parenting, I think things would go a lot easier, and it would be filled with a lot more joy and ease and so forth. So that's what I've dedicated my life to doing, is sharing about Montessori, sharing about positive discipline that I discovered through being a teacher, and just, being a conscious parent and so forth. So that's what I'm doing. And I call myself a parenting mentor. I have a podcast, The Art of Parenting, where I share, I interview guests, and more recently I am a birth doula. So yeah, all sorts of beautiful things.
Yeah. How exciting, bringing a beautiful life into the world with someone as nurturing and educated as you are. Because when you were sharing about starting the positive Montessori training, I had moved to San Diego from Atlanta, and I had similar situation as yours, and my children had gone to a different school, and I just couldn't pinpoint it, but it just didn't feel right. There was something wrong. And I remember my husband saying, well, if you want it your way, then the only way you can do that is to open your own school. And I thought he was kidding. He was not. He said, if you really are interested in this, then you should do this. And I contacted the same director, Dr. Dubovoy, and I had said, and it was 3 or 4 weeks into the semester already. And I walked in with some tears, and she said, you know what? That's what we're here for. And I remember it was a very, very trying year for me to discover myself and to become a prepared adult. And that same training center for both of us was a rebirth in some way, because for me, I gained so many tools. And I realized that, wow, I was meant to be with children just like you did later in your, after having children. So both of us had that now what moment. And I don't know about you, but I didn't even know that I would be great with children. And I realized that it's actually what I was most connected to is human beings.
That's beautiful.
It's a lovely journey. And I'm so glad that I've had my options of having this journey with you in San Diego. And both of us are positive discipline trained too. And it was accidentally, but our paths have crossed in many different ways. So we have similar themes. And I'm excited to share with our folks who are listening or watching a little bit more about Montessori, because it seems to be, what is Montessori? That seems to be the biggest topic. So how would you kind of share your perspective on what Montessori education is, speaking about the training center and then the training we receive?
So first and foremost, Montessori, we have to acknowledge that it is the name of a woman, Maria Montessori, Dr. Maria Montessori, who was an Italian doctor who really focused on children and observing children and discovering how children's brains was working and so forth. And to me, it's just fascinating because I've always said she was a genius before her time, because all of the information that, she discovered through her scientific observation are now being proven through brain scans, through, brain studies and so forth. And one thing, that Dr. Montessori said is, I did not invent a method. I just gave the children an opportunity to live. So I always like to say that Montessori is an education as an aid to life. And the curriculum or the method, contrary to maybe more conventional education, is child-driven, because we know that children are born with this, appetite to learn, and they're curious, and their goal and their task is to adapt to their time, place, and culture. And so we are as trained, you mentioned the word trained, prepared adults. That's our training, right? We prepare ourselves to be in the presence of divine little beings, because, and the education or the method is really driven by them and their curiosity. So there is an extensive curriculum from birth to 24 years of age. It is not only for early childhood education, how, I think sometimes Montessori is defined. And it's really this idea that we are preparing an environment for them that is suitable to their developmental windows. So contrary to more conventional education, where we separate our children by their birthdays, by, how old they are, here we are keeping them in a mixed age classroom for about 3 years, which is that developmental window that they all seem to be, together at the same time. And that was my initial training, was 3 to 6. Then I went back and did a 0 to 3 training. So it is child driven. It's mixed age groups. There's a prepared environment. There is this notion that we have freedom within limits, because I think also Montessori gets this bad rap of, oh yeah, it's that school where children, do whatever they want.
Free for all.
Not so. We are very diligent about the limits, and really the environment itself is setting the limits in the beginning. And that's why we prepare it so well. Because, for example, there are, activities on the shelves that are at their level, at their eye level, that they can freely choose if it's been shown, which is one of the limits. But there's only one activity for 25 children. So we have to wait our turn. We're learning social skills, right? There's not 25 of the same thing. So we're learning to share. We're learning to cooperate and collaborate and so forth. So that's really this notion of the prepared environment. And the other important thing is this idea of freedom of choice, meaning that if you have had a presentation on a number of activities in the classroom, you are free to choose that activity for as many times as it is necessary for you to master that skill. Right? Who are we to say, oh, no, you've worked with that enough, right? It is the child who knows when they've mastered the skill. And to me, that was something that was fascinating at first, because I actually remember this one boy that was in my classroom, and he was fascinated with one of the math activities, which was these colored bead chains, and it's skip counting. And he would choose that work every day and repeat it and all that. And I remember asking the assistant trainer, like, what can I do? Like, how can I get him to be engaged with something else? And she said, but no, this is his task right now. He needs to understand that. And what was fascinating is, a few weeks down the road, I introduced this multiplication activity. And he was like, oh, that's like the other one, right? He had memorized all of the skip counting, and that was his need at the time. So it's just beautiful for me in the way that we really respect the child's drive to learn. We respect their need for concentration. So we respect their flow. We're not interrupting them every 20 minutes like in most conventional schools. And the curriculum that's in that prepared environment is for the 3 years. So they stay in that environment for the 3 years. They go through, levels of difficulties, levels of challenges. And it's just beautiful. The other thing that I will say is before 6 years of age, the Montessori curriculum is really based in reality. We give really concrete information. We try to avoid, kind of little fairy tales and things that aren't concrete, because the child before 6 is hungry for the real information. They want to know the names of everything, and they want to know how things work and why and what and all this. So we're not going to trick them. We're just giving them the and I know with some parents that's always like hard, because they want to share, some silly children's story that they were, and I say, fine, just wait until 6 when when their brain no longer needs that concrete information. And then, like I mentioned already, just the respect of concentration. Like there's this real, we call it an uninterrupted work cycle. And in my classroom, it was 2.5 hours in the morning, sometimes 3 hours, where the children are free to choose the activities that they want. And it's just beautiful, and it's quiet, and it's peaceful, because everybody is actually working on what they want to be working. They're not being told what to do. So the guide, the adult that is in that environment, will, give a lesson to a child who maybe needs the next challenge, or maybe who's, having a hard time choosing, or so forth. But otherwise, they're really, working on their own. And one thing I will say, we talk about the prepared environment, but in that prepared environment is a prepared adult who is a big part of that prepared environment, right? An adult who is trained in the curriculum, who understands the didactic material, who understands the principles of, Montessori philosophy and all of this, and who is really there for the children, right? That we're trained to really be in the presence of what I consider divine little beings who are here, eager to learn and just curious and just so full of love.
Yes, I think what you just shared, that freedom within limits and creating this environment that is truly for this child. It's an invitation. And I know you've taken the 0 to 3 training and 3 to 6. And as a doula, perhaps you can sort of tell us a lot about this prepared environment, because that's a concept that I know. It took me a while, or the training, to understand what is this prepared environment, and how, and then later, if you can also share, how could a parent at home create this environment that is designed at school as well?
So the notion of the prepared environment is that we are, we live in very adult-centric environments, and we have created these beautiful homes and where we live, where everything is at our eye level, at our arm's reach, and so forth. And then you have a young child that comes into that environment. They can't do anything for themselves because the environment has not been adapted to their needs, to their developmental needs. I always like to say that a prepared environment is very similar to when you are going to welcome a guest in your home for, maybe the holidays, or they're visiting, and maybe they're, a great aunt that has maybe some difficulties walking on their own and has a walker or whatever, you're probably going to prepare the environment. You're going to move some furniture around. You're going to put a nice bouquet of flowers in their room. You're going to prepare it for them, right? The only difference with your child is they're going to be staying around for quite a bit longer, and that their needs are also going to evolve, right? And so when we talk about the preparing environment, I like to take it to prenatally, right? We have conceived. We know that we are expecting a child. Well, already there, that's a prepared environment, right? We are mindful of what we're eating. We're mindful of our movements, of our thoughts, of being healthy and all that. That is their first prepared environment. Then we are considering how and where do we want to give birth, right? The birth environment itself is a really big transition for both the parent and the child. So we think about that, we prepare it. And for me, I'm a great believer of the less intervention and the more peaceful and quiet we can be to really respect the birthing person and their connection, the baby and the mother's connection, very important. And then the following environment is the home, right? Where we bring our infant home, we want to be able to have an environment that they feel is theirs, that they are welcome, because it is now their home too, right? So we are wanting to put things down low at their eye level and so forth. I always actually tell parents, when they're expecting or they already have a young child, an infant, I said, get down on all fours and crawl around your home. See it from their perspective, or just sit on the floor for a moment and just observe around, right? And it can be, I do a lot of home visits and home consultation. One time I was in this home and they had just had their first child. And there was this beautiful wall of all these family photos, just gorgeous. And I said, well, how about that last row? Why don't you take it down, just down to your son's eye level, because he was starting to crawl around. And she did that. And she said, oh my goodness, it was marvelous, because he would go and we were able to share stories of who was in the photos and give language and so forth. So it's just about seeing the environment through our children's eyes. That is what it is about preparing the environment for them. And it eases their adaptation, which is their biggest task, right? Is to adapt. So if we are preparing the environment for them, they can, more easily adapt, as opposed to everything, is not reachable. They don't have access to things that they can do on their own. They're dependent on us all the time to do things. And actually, one of the big, for me, kind of sets us off from others, like in the Montessori parenting world, is the notion of the floor bed. So this is a concept that is preparing the environment for our infant, right? We're not putting our infant in a container, which is the crib, right? A box with bars so that, they can't get away, when it really was invented to appease, the adults. It's a 19th century invention. And, practically all over the world, I'm sure people sleep more on floor beds than anything else. And the idea of the floor bed for an infant is that they will very quickly understand what is the surface, what is the limit of the surface that they get to relax and sleep on. And the beauty with this is that when they are, rested and awake, they can crawl off and come find us. They don't need to, scream, I'm done, I need to get out of here. They just crawl over, or, we've set up the prepared environment. So there might be a toy or a book that they can play with or look at. And the beauty too is that when they are tired, well, they know where to go and they go on their own. They don't need us to read their cues of, oh, are you tired? Are you not? Maybe I should put you down. Maybe not, right? They know where their bed is and they go. So that's a little bit in a nutshell what the prepared environment is. And it really, for me, it starts at conception.
Yes. And that is fascinating, especially the floor beds and preparing the environment that invites children to be very independent. And can you speak to the safety? So what are your thoughts about safety? Because for many of us, when we have the babies and we're used to seeing others have a crib, and now I want to set up a bed on the floor. And how high is this bed? And what are the limitations? Would my baby get injured if they roll over? So how would you address?
So the bed is really a mattress on the floor. There's also some lovely wooden frames that you can, put the mattress in. It's true that it's nice that there's some airflow underneath, but it's really very close to the ground. And the child, the infant, and so for me, when I do my kind of home consultations and everything, it's true that at first, the newborn, the kind of a Moses basket or, something that is close to mom at the beginning, like maybe the first few months because of night feeding and so forth, is going to be easier. So maybe the floor bed will be a tiny bit later. But even if they are, for example, in a Moses basket, putting that basket on the mattress where the child will be sleeping gives them that point of reference that, this, I recognize this. This is where I relax and I sleep. So when we are preparing the environment for an infant, we're looking at four basic areas that we call points of reference. And those are the sleep, the feeding, the personal care area, and then the movement area, right? So going back to your question about, the safety of the floor bed, personally, I think it is extremely safe, right? There's techniques that we can make it a little safer, but it's a flat surface. There's nothing, to get stuck in or whatever. And especially for me, what is dangerous with the crib is when they have a little bit more movement and they want to get out. Well, sometimes they'll try to climb out and then they'll fall from pretty up high. So I would much rather that they roll off their mattress, and they will roll off their mattress, but that is a learning. That is the opportunity to learn what is the limit of the mattress, right? And to me, it's fascinating because when you observe an infant on a mattress that is on the floor, they will actually kind of slither to the edge, and they're very, very intelligent. They will sense that there is a different level, and they'll just slither back. So, from the very beginning, they are learning what the limit is. So for me, I would say it's safe, very safe. And I actually have a blog post on my website kind of going into detail on that. But I would, and I would probably, I haven't done the research, but I would probably assume that more people sleep on floor beds than in cribs, when we look on a planetary level.
Yes. Well, I can tell you for myself, who has been raised on a floor bed into adulthood, at least until 12, definitely can say that it's a very easy way to know where the height difference is, and it invites that independence, the flexibility to move from one area to another. Right. So you spoke about 3 other areas. Could you speak to the feeding area? So these are children perhaps birth to 9 months of age or 12 months of age. How do they function within this environment, and how are these 4 areas separated?
So the 4 areas, when I was talking about the prepared environment, is that we're creating these areas to give the child some points of reference, meaning that when they are in those areas, they know what to expect. They know, what is expected of them, but what might happen. So we talked about the sleeping area, the floor bed, and then there is the feeding area, for example. And the feeding area at first is going to be adult-centric, because at the beginning we might be breastfeeding or bottle feeding. But let's make that environment a kind of a calm area for the parent who is feeding the child, where we can relax, because this is a very important moment in our child's development, when we are feeding them, when we are connecting with them, when we are letting them know that they are the most important being on planet Earth, and we are there with love and kindness and feeding them, right? So we're really connecting, and especially if you're breastfeeding, you're back to being one, really. And so I like to create an environment that is extremely comfortable for the parent who is feeding, free of distractions. Like you don't need the TV and the iPad and all of that and the phone. Like this is an important moment. And I know, when I say this, but oh my goodness, it feels like it's 24/7. At the beginning, it kind of is, but that too shall pass. And this is some critical moments in your child's brain development. So take it seriously and enjoy it, right? As much as you can. So that's the feeding. And that feeding area is going to transform and evolve when the child starts being interested in solid foods. And there, usually in a Montessori home, we use what we call a weaning table, which is a table that's very low with a weaning chair where the child has shown us that they're able to sit up on their own. They have their feet on the ground and they start self-feeding, right? We usually stay with them and show them how to do so and everything. Not every home, has room for a weaning table. I like to recommend high chairs that come to our table, not high chairs that are with, a platter where they're kind of on an island on their own. Like invite them into your table. So there's chairs that, a famous one that's called a trip trap, for example, that evolves with the child that I just highly recommend. But so that's going to change, right? And then we can even say that the feeding area will then evolve when the child can start preparing their own snack, right? When they're walking and their hands are free to work, we're going to show them how to do that as well. So that's the feeding. Then we have the personal care area. And here again, at the beginning with an infant, it's going to be, again, adult-centric, because we want the adult to be comfortable. We want the adult to have everything at arm's reach. So the caregiver who is taking care of the infant. And this can be done, really anywhere. Some people like to be standing. Some people like to be sitting on the floor. So it's wherever you're going to consistently set the child down and interact with them, whether you're, changing their diapers, whether you're giving them a massage, putting clothes on, and so forth. My recommendation here is to be very aware of the orientation of your changing area. You should be forward-facing, facing your child straight on. Oftentimes, I see changing tables that are up against a wall, and we are tending to a child just sideways, and it makes them kind of, crick their neck in different ways, and it's just, we're not looking at them, straight on. So that would be my only thing, right? Just the other day, I did a home visit, part of my birth doula kind of prenatal visits. And, they had the changing table in a little corner. And I said, well, let's change it so that you can be facing your child to be. So that's that. And then for, when the child evolves, because we need to be very aware that after a while, a child is not going to be wanting to be laid down on their back to change their diapers. They start fighting the changing table. And there, it's just a message. It's just them saying, show me something different. This isn't working for me anymore. So there we, have to maybe adapt the bathroom where we do some changing standing. Then we can start offering the potty, and we have this whole toilet awareness that starts happening, and then toilet independence. And that's a whole beautiful process. But again, that takes a prepared environment for them to be able to be aware of everything. And for me, I've always say, like, if you have the luxury to put the personal care area from day one in the bathroom, then that's awesome, because then they will be aware from the beginning that, elimination and everything happens in the bathroom. And then the movement area. So the movement area is at first when they are infants. It can be a nice rug or a thin futon or a mat on the floor, preferably if you can up against a wall. And there you can put a mirror that is kind of lengthwise on the floor against that mat. Children just love looking at themselves. They don't know that who they're looking at, but they're fascinated, and it gives them information about their body scheme and so forth. And the movement basically really, again, is going to adapt as their movement develops, because movement, that's a whole other topic that is just fascinating, what the child goes through in a 12-month period. But basically on the movement mat, once the child discovers on their own, so this is all about natural development, when they are able to roll over and then they find a way to sit, they become kind of primates where they want to start pulling on things, right? They want to start standing up. And there in front of that mirror, we can put a bar, what we call a coordination bar. And they start pulling themselves up and they start standing on 2 feet. And the joy on their face is just amazing. Like oh my goodness, I'm doing it, right? Because they want to adapt. They want to be like the adults that they're seeing. And once they start crawling and walking, well, your entire home becomes their movement area. So make it safe for exploration, right? There might be items that you're going to get out of the way just temporarily, because this isn't going to last forever, but make it safe. And that's why I always say, like, crawl around, see what they might get into, and let them explore safely.
Yes, absolutely amazing that this one area could invite so much independence. And thanks for sharing exactly how we can create this environment for the children to be independent. It's like, help me to do it myself, but we're just sort of aiding in a very slight way, which is just the preparing of the environment. So Jeanne-Marie, you spoke about preparing this beautiful environment that is natural. It aids to children's needs. And as the holidays come up or our birthdays happen, we have family members and they give us all the goodies. What are some of the ways we would organize them, store them, or what are things that children would benefit from having?
Oh, that's a loaded question, Yogi. So I tend to err on the minimalist and very simple. And honestly, children do not need anything. They do not need toys, right? They are very content with playing with sticks and stones and the pots and pans and so forth. So for me, some of the things that are very important to keep in mind when we are choosing toys for our children is to ask ourselves a few questions, like, what is the intelligent purpose of this toy, right? What is it helping the child master, whether it is a concept or a a fine motor or gross motor skill. I avoid any type of toy that is noise-making, battery-operated, and so forth for infants and really for any child, because that tends to be a toy that kind of does its things on its own. And oftentimes, those sounds and everything interrupt their concentration and what they're looking at. So things that are, and I have a bunch of YouTube videos on kind of activities and quote unquote toys, but basically I go to the hardware store and get, a lock and key or transferring water from a vase to a glass or things like that. So it's about like mastering just these skills, these lifelong skills. And so for me, during the holidays, during the birthdays, I always try to encourage parents and grandparents and all those wanting to gift children to try to think about experiences, about time to connect with you. Maybe give them a little gift certificate of a day with grandma and grandpa and go to the zoo or go to a museum or go to, a park where you can look at flowers and learn things. Or maybe with an older child will be a lesson in cooking or in sewing or things like that are skills that they're going to keep for forever, right? We tend to accumulate a lot of things and gadgets and so forth. And then, like you say, so where do we store them, right? What do we do with them? And that can get very overwhelming for the parent, but especially for the child, because the child, especially the first 3 years and until about 5, they are extremely sensitive to order. And when I say order, I am talking about the physical order of things and also kind of the rhythm of our day and the routines. But physical order brings internal order, right? That if we have a very cluttered environment and there are, toys everywhere and such, it can be confusing and overwhelming. So when we're preparing that environment, we want to try to have a low shelf with just a few toys. Oftentimes they're either in a tray or in a basket so that they're complete. They're all the pieces are together. And we want to try to have more manipulative things that are going to really challenge our children's dexterity and challenge their brain development. And not just, things where pressing buttons and it's making sounds. So yeah, keep it to a minimum. And, I know like in the Montessori shells and everything, like if you see on social media and everything, they're talking about, their beautiful curated shelves, which is fine, but they also talk a lot about toy rotation. And here I would just be mindful that it's just you observing your child. So if a child is always going back to the same toy, do not rotate it. They're still working with it. They're still trying to figure something out. If there's a toy they haven't touched in a week or so, maybe trade it out for something else, right? Or sometimes if a toy is being misused or, misused, thrown or things, that's oftentimes a signal that it's either not challenging enough or too challenging, right? So there again, we are observing and we can just take that toy away, not in a punitive way or anything. It's like, oh, it seems like we don't, we're not wanting to play with this anymore. Let's put it away and let's find something else. So curate the environment where there's a minimal amount of toys and try to, have a closet or a space where you can store a few, but limit the amount of things that you bring into your home. Because honestly, for me, the best gifts that you can give are actually good quality child-sized tools for everyday use of being able to cook with you and sew and garden and things like that, because that's really what they want to be doing. They want to be doing what they've been watching adults do. And those are really the best gifts.
Yes, absolutely. Wonderful little tidbits here. I appreciate what you said about skills. Children are developing various skills, and having too many things on the shelf might create chaotic environment, internal chaos for them.
And then imagine, if there's so many toys that they take them all off the shelf and they're all over the floor, and then it's like, oh, let's clean up. It's like, no, like it's way too much, right? And that's for the adult and the child. So again, you're doing yourself a service by limiting the amount of toys and gadgets that you bring into your home, your environment, like the simplicity and the order of the environment really affects our psyche. At least I know for me, when there's a mess in the house, I'm not a happy camper. And so imagine a tiny human who just gets overwhelmed with so much around.
Yes, I think taking that time for us to first show this young one that, hey, this is a new toy. Let's explore it together. This is how we're going to work with it. This is where it gets returned when we're done. And I appreciate that idea. One thing at a time, put it away, get another one, so that all the parts aren't mixed together. And now we're sorting and having tantrums at the end because it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I enjoyed hearing about experiences. So when we have true, genuine experiences with our children, even as grandparents saying, let me take you to the zoo. So as we carry the child or we walk the child, the experiences are different. So what are some of the experiences just from going to the zoo and walking or being really low to the ground what children acquire? What are some of the skills that we're showing? Because sometimes we don't think about all the children are absorbing and how they learn.
Well, first of all, I mean, they're just experiencing with all of their senses, right? Because a young child is a sensorial learner. So, when you say the zoo, what came to me was odors, right? When different odors, when you're near different animals, or if you get to go to, the children's zoo area, you're going to feel the different coats of the animal. You're going to learn language because you're going to see for yourself what an elephant looks like and how huge it is and so forth. So you're going to be able to make sense of the concrete world. Remember, I talked about reality-based. So here we're giving them those sensorial experiences to make sense of the physical world. And that to me is the beauty. So when you go to the zoo or to the park or anywhere with a child, please, please, please slow down and go at their pace. See what they see and experience it with them, because they might just stand there and just look at awe at this huge elephant, for example, right? And just need to just soak it in and take it in. So just be there with them, like be in the present moment, just like they are. There are great little teachers of slowing down and being in the present moment. And also, I will say that when you go someplace like that and they might not be the least bit interested, and that's okay, because they're in the present moment. Maybe there's a dandelion that is coming through the cracks of the sidewalk, and that's what's fascinating to them. So that's it. Give them the language of what that is and so forth. Like, it's just this real understanding for me, like what is to be a prepared adult is to be able to be in the present moment with the children. So,
yes. I remember walking to the zoo with my children and remembering the tiniest thing they can spot, or things that I take for granted or from high up I don't notice, that they would stop and take a moment and, what is this flower called, Mama? This, what is this one called? And shapes of the leaves and variety of things. So that experience is not just a walk, but it's that bonding time, the language time that you spoke about, sensory experience of just soaking it all in, and that self-construction of a human being. It's priceless. And I also enjoyed your conversation about bonding with the child when you're feeding. Those are special moments. Now mine are 27 and 29. And just kind of looking back at that moments, where did they begin? Were in those early years, where just the scent, the touch, the being able to have a conversation, the sense of safety, and all those just kind of flooded back to my mind as you were having this amazing conversation. And my last question, or my curiosity here, is about intrinsic motivation, because often our children are doing a lot of different things, and the go-to response can be sometimes a praise, like, yay!
Great question, because I think it's kind of ingrained in us that we want to be the cheerleader of our children and so forth. But here I would really, encourage parents and grandparents of young children, or any adult that is around young children, is that they're not doing it for us. They're doing it for themselves. So let them enjoy that moment for themselves. That is how they're going to develop that kind of that intrinsic need, and also just the confidence and the self-worth, because they're able to do things for themselves. So one thing we say, especially the first 3 years, is that we stand on two psychological legs. The first one is trust in the world. And that is, as an infant, our needs are being answered. We cry because we're hungry, because we're cold and such. Somebody is going to come to our rescue and help us, and so forth. So we have a trust in the world. We know that this is a safe place. I am safe. I can thrive. I'm going to thrive and expand, and so forth. And then comes trust in ourselves. And that comes from being left alone so that we can figure things out on our own, right? That the famous sentence of Montessori is, help me to do it by myself. So be there, help, create an environment, prepare that environment for them, but let them go through the struggles of, making the mistakes, of retrying, of getting frustrated. And I'm not saying like never help a child and never step in, but give them time to figure things out on their own. And instead of, saying good job, just like, ooh, good job, just kind of, it ends up being kind of like this broken record that has no true meaning. Think about what you can encourage, like praise the effort, praise the process. Like, oh my gosh, peeling those potatoes look really hard, and you were able to use that peeler. That's pretty cool. That's it, right? It's about noticing what they're doing and just letting them know, like, you see it and you see that they're making the effort, right? As opposed to overpraising, which, I think, especially I feel in the United States, we have a tendency to, want to give trophies to everybody, whether they're, whether they've won or not. And it's like, you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but let's even like maybe get rid of those trophies and just say, wow, that was intense. That was a great effort on everybody's part. And voila, and not have to always overpraise for me. And overpraising to me is also what the danger of it is that we're teaching children that they're doing things for external rewards, for external gratification. They're not doing it for themselves. And, oftentimes, and, we might have some listeners that can relate that, we're people pleasers because we want to be told good job all the time when we're not doing it for ourselves, for our intrinsic values, for our self-worth. So let's start from a young age of just being able to observe what they're doing and not necessarily having to tell them how wonderful they are, because they already know they're wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. And interestingly enough, when we keep giving the trophies or gifts, they mean nothing. We notice that they're under the bed or just thrown around. But that valuable piece that you spoke about, that connection to acknowledge the effort, really goes deep. It makes you feel so valued. And I can recall that as a child, just remembering the moments where someone really believed in me.
Right. And for me, it's like, it's setting up also kind of expectations, because then it's, I will only do things if I get something for it. And well, that's not really a very healthy way of setting them up for the rest of their lives.
Yes, indeed. This was an amazing conversation, Jeanne-Marie. And if folks need to reach you, what is your email or what is your website address?
So my website is Your Parenting Mentor, and that's where most of my things are. I also have a podcast called The Art of Parenting, which is on Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And those are my two main ones. So there's a contact on my website, Your Parenting Mentor. If you need to reach out, I'm available for private mentorship, or I have also some digital courses. And if you're in San Diego and are birthing, I'm a birth doula. So there.
Jeanne-Marie, what a pleasure to always connect with you, to learn with you, and just truly grateful that you were able to share some tools and make the parents realize or support them in knowing that they're on the right path and they're doing a great job. Good enough.
Yes. Well, thank you, Yogi, for all that you've done and this wonderful platform, and lovely connecting with you.
Yes. Until next time, where we have additional conversation on movement and more.
Yes.